Hey there, art nerds. It's been almost a month since Hurricane Ida, and I wanted to kind of share what's been happening, what's been going on, and paint with you guys today. So this is an illustration inspired by Ida and the aftermath, and hopefully you guys will enjoy hanging out with me today, because gosh, I sure have missed hanging out with y'all. It can be kind of a challenge for me to capture live drawing for you guys, so here's a series of photographs that kind of capture the process for sketching this illustration. This illustration is titled Rebirth, and it's inspired by the apple trees that have been struck pretty hard by Ida, then chopped up even worse by my brother and his friend, but still put out new leaves and try to continue with a new life. So this illustration was sketched with Pentel red lead, and it was sketched on Fluid 100 cotton rag watercolor paper. I'm going to ink this now with a Sakura Pigma FB brush pen. With this sort of art, I could have gone either way. I could have just painted on top of the red line art and gone for kind of a lineless style, but I opted to ink it because it would allow me to do more all over washes and wet into wet techniques. And what I really want to capture with this illustration, what I really want to convey to other people, is even though the area where I live, St. Charles Parish, got hit really hard. It's been almost a month, and quite frankly, it feels like everything's just kind of stagnated. They got the Walmart up, they got the gas stations up, and then it's just kind of stagnating right now. They're not really Entergy, which is the local electric company, and Cox, which is the local cable and internet company. And to be frank, they're both monopolies in this area, so there's no other options. They're both really dragging their feet in getting power to individual houses or getting the internet back up and usable so that people can communicate and also find out what's going on the news. And it has been incredibly frustrating and depressing to not only watch efforts stagnate as we're trying to recover, but also watch our neighbors pile everything they own into the yard, and you realize just how bad the damage, just how bad the devastation was. It wasn't immediately apparent in the first week after Ida, but as things seem to drag on, as time progresses, more and more damage is coming about from our inability to get reliable roofers, our inability to get reliable tree removal services. We've got all of these people who've come in from out of state, primarily from Texas, but I've even seen like Colorado plates, Florida plates, Georgia plates, and it's kind of fly-by-night operations. They're not really doing a good or complete job. Joseph and I got cheated on a tree removal by somebody from Alabama because, frankly, all the local options are booked up for the next at least 6 weeks minimum into infinity. So even recovery is just really challenging and frustrating right now. The house that we had just purchased, we never even got a chance to live in it, is still without power, and we can see the downed line, and Entergy has been just blowing us off and not coming out and looking at it and not taking us seriously. And it's just been really challenging, frustrating, and kind of depressing. It's kind of like getting sand into the gears of a mechanism. A little bit of sand at first doesn't really seem to make a difference, but as time progresses and more sand enters that mechanism, it starts to grind and things become harder and harder until the machine eventually stops. And honestly, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Everything around us has kind of stopped. There's not a lot of progress, but the world outside of our little bubble of St. Charles Parish has forgotten us. It's moved on, or it has expectations that without electricity or internet, we just can't keep up with. I mean, I've been trying to keep up with things. I've been trying for normalcy, but I'm evacuated. I'm staying at someone else's house. I'm living out of a single room. I don't have internet. I don't have good cell reception because, I mean, this is a known problem with AT&T. They know there's no cell service out here, and yet they won't do anything to fix it. So it's time to switch when things get a little bit better. and you're able to get out to a store and do that. I mean, I'm not trapped here, but it takes so long to get to anywhere. It takes, in order to write descriptions on videos, I have to drive to Metairie and find a coffee shop that has somewhat decent Wi-Fi. So that's 30 minutes just driving out there. And then I'm basically working from my car trying to get stuff scheduled. And while that was okay for 1 week or 2 weeks, and it wasn't so bad because we were watching the streets being cleared and we were watching the linemen out trying to get poles back up and restringing the poles, and every day, you know, something new was working, like, oh, a new stoplight, or not a new, but an old stoplight is now working again, or this street has lights now, or hey, the cables across the road have been cleared off. There hasn't been any progress. It's impossible to get them to give an honest answer about when they're going to be done. And everything's just getting harder and harder and harder as time drags out and as time progresses. And I don't really like doing downer talks with you guys too much. But this is just a reality of what I'm facing, and I'm having a really hard time. I'm an artist. I'm reliant on the world outside of the neighborhood I live in to make sales, to find work, to garner an audience. I have an audience worldwide, and without reliable internet, without reliable electricity, without a large workspace, without a quiet space to record audio, without a consistent work schedule, I can't do it like this forever. We've been living in recovery mode now for the past month, and it's hard. I mean, I was here before Katrina. I was here after Katrina. I know what recovery looks like, but the world has changed since Katrina, and everything moves so much faster. You're so much more reliant on internet. You're so much more reliant on internet on your phone, that without internet and electricity and a safe space to work, it gets harder and harder and harder. So I'm doing the best I can to try and keep my head above water, but my yearly inking challenge is about to start, and honestly, I'm really heavily reliant on the internet for that challenge, not only to share it. I haven't been able to share anything to Instagram because I can't even get it to load, but I look up reference for Lilliputian living, and without the internet, that becomes this Sisyphean task that's just so much harder. So I'm doing the best I can, but it's a really difficult time, and the best way, as I've said every other time I've talked about it, if you do want to help me do what I do, is to share my videos, to boost my videos, signal boost them, leave comments, leave engagement, because I just don't have the energy right now to fight the YouTube algorithm. It's already hard enough just to get videos up and scheduled. So after I inked this illustration, I let the inks dry for at least 24 hours, and I didn't opt to stretch this piece. I taped it down with washi tape. I was hoping that would do a decent enough job kind of holding it steady. It did not. I should have used my usual blue painter's tape. I don't know how other artists are able to get plain old washi tape to hold their watercolor or their gouache or their Posca illustrations down without it just buckling all over the place. But I just have not had any success with that. So Louisiana is super humid, and humidity control is really important right now. So I'm still running a large dehumidifier in my room at all times unless I'm recording audio. I'm also running the bathroom fan at all times unless I'm recording audio. So for this illustration, I wanted to capture this sort of hopeful renewal feeling, this we're going to rebuild, we're going to be better than ever sort of feeling, that looking at the apple leaves, the budding out apple tree, that kind of reminded me that no matter how much you get cut back, no matter what obstacles are in your way, there's still an opportunity for renewal and regrowth. That's what I wanted to capture with this illustration. So I drew Kara sitting on an apple tree stump, budding out with leaves, as you guys saw from my reference illustration. That was really inspiring for me. And she's also holding a small apple tree twig that's also budding out. And I started out by trying to convey this like after the storm sort of sunlit feeling. So I streaked some warm yellow across the illustration. And I also did an underpainting using ultramarine blue, which is a warmer granulating blue that I thought would really work well to kind of capture that sort of after the rain feeling that I was going for. Now, if you guys remember the reference at the start of this tutorial, art chat, whatever you want to call it, that apple tree stump, apple tree cut off is covered in lichen and moss, and I really wanted to capture that texture. So while I am very limited with my internet and I'm very limited with my space and I'm very limited with my resources, I had sent this image to myself via Discord and downloaded it while at a coffee shop, and I had it up on my computer so that I could reference it, because I can't even send myself photos via Discord right now without going to Metairie to download them. All of the things that as an artist who has internet capabilities generally, I take for granted, I think of as just due course, everyday life, second nature, all of that is gone right now. I can't record things and use the internet because I use my phone is the only source of internet I have at the house, and even then it's not a reliable source of internet due to AT&T's negligence over the years. So it's definitely been an uphill battle and a struggle, and it's definitely very frustrating. And I know there are other artists in Southeast Louisiana who were affected, but it's hard to find other artists other than the ones in New Orleans who New Orleans was hit, but not nearly as bad. So it's just kind of a different solidarity vibe, because they got power first, like the week after the storm, and wanted to still complain about how bad everything is. So, you know, it's all relative. I don't live their lives. One person's bad does not negate another person's bad. It's just been a really frustrating time, honestly. So I'm really trying to kind of push the sunshine through the storm sort of imagery. So I drew a bunch of raindrops, not only on Kara, but on the leaves themselves. And I also masked off some specks just by flicking masking fluid onto the paper. And that's going to kind of create kind of a watery spray effect. And you guys have seen me do that effect in several other tutorials. This isn't the first time I've done it, but it's an effect I really enjoy and I think can add a lot of liveliness to my illustrations. And this was created while evacuated, while in the world's not best workspace, because it was just kind of a way for me to process what's been going on and to try hopefully and convey what's been going on to other people, because I have been talking about it on Twitter, but nobody cares. And I've been talking about it in the paint box, and a couple people care, but the rest of them don't care. And I haven't even had any friends check on me since like August. So it's hard not to feel abandoned, and I'm trying to use my art to communicate with other people. And I actually have the sewing room coming out. It'll be out by the time this video is out, but like by the time I'm doing my narration, it's going out tomorrow, where I kind of talk about all this. So some of this is you guys are going to hear about it in the sewing room. This is kind of a continuation on that. So if you want to hear about kind of an earlier state of Ida recovery, or if you just enjoy watching me paint, you guys can check out the sewing room. I hope you will. I'll link it in the description. I also have a playlist with all of my like art chats and illustrations where I kind of start talking more about art in general and less about the step-to-step nitty-gritty watercolor process. That if you guys are looking for just hangout art videos, I really hope you'll check that playlist out. I think it makes good company when you're drawing or you're painting or doing digital art. And that's something I really miss, is when I'm working, I usually have YouTube up, and I really like James Mansfield's wig tutorials. I think they're really cool. So that's been really good company for me lately. And I just feel very lonely here, because if I'm working, I'm isolated in a very cold room in the house all by myself, without access to music, without access to YouTube. I can't even call somebody. So it's a very lonely experience. And I use art to communicate, so you guys can only imagine how challenging things are right now. I don't want to just complain, but I know most people are not from Southeast Louisiana. Most people don't really understand what's going on right now or what individuals are going through. And the only way people can know is if we talk about it. So I'm talking about it. And we don't even have it the worst. We are fairly fortunate. My house that I can't live in right now because there's no electricity had a tree fall on it and the roof is damaged, and we're going to be waiting a long time to get the roof fixed because they can't come out for like 6 weeks. And the trees that were like blocking entrance to our house, the branches have been removed, but there's still some widowmaker branches. So Joseph had to find a different tree service to come out and fix them because he tried to fix it, and it's just, he doesn't have the skills necessary to go up, climb up, remove these branches that weigh as much as I do from these giant live oak trees. So it's been we can't even make any progress on getting our new home ready to live in. It's been a challenge. So I wanted to really focus on capturing how the apple tree stump looked and felt. I wanted to capture the bark texture. I wanted to capture the lichen. So I'm doing a lot of wet into wet diffused watercolor, and I'm like trying to encourage some blending, but I'm trying to keep the lichen also somewhat distinct. I don't know if you guys get, like when I lived in Nashville, I didn't see lichen as prevalent as it is here in Louisiana, but that could have been like a pollution thing with Nashville. I don't really know. Just because it's a bigger city with more car exhaust, and where I'm staying right now is more rural, even though it's it's like suburban rural. Louisiana people know what I'm talking about. Because like right behind this place is a bunch of woods and a swamp. So, and that's partially why maybe, we didn't get as hard hit as some parts of Kenner got hit, because like parts of Kenner that are right on Lake Pontchartrain got like the wind damage knocked over massive billboards. That it's just crazy to think about. So, basically, I wanted to get that stump really established because that was the thing that I was going to be working heavily from reference. That was the thing that I wanted to look fairly realistic, although really nothing I draw or paint is ever super realistic. I'm not going for photorealism at any point. As an illustrator, I think of myself as a storyteller. I mean, I am a comic artist after all, and creating comics is all about telling stories, whether they're nonfiction or fictional. So I'm all about trying to convey stories. This is actually the most conceptual piece of art I've done in a while. I'm not really big on conceptual art in general, but I had a concept for this that I felt really attached to, and I don't know why my camera's messing up right there. So for the apple tree leaves, I'm really just using a cooler yellow like bismuth yellow and ultramarine blue, and just layering them back and forth to build up the kind of greens that I'm looking for. You guys can see when painting the stump, it's all about building up layer after layer, giving it a chance to dry, and going back and repainting it. And anything that I draw or paint while I'm in luling takes like 4 times longer than it normally would, because we're spending a lot of our time driving around, either bringing Joseph back to Gonzales because he's staying in Gonzales during the week because we don't have electricity or internet, and he works remotely, so he can't work if he doesn't have those things. So please, energy, fix our house. Yeah. Anyway, so that's like an hour and a half drive each way. And we're doing that on Fridays and we're doing that on Sundays. And then every day we have to drive to Metairie just to get enough internet to check like MydNyte. MydNyte is a medical information gateway that Auctioner Medical Systems uses. And I have several family members who are disabled or have a lot of medical needs, so checking MydNyte regularly is really important. We also can't load emails out here in Luling because of AT&T, so we have to go to Metairie to do that. So a lot of time is lost driving around trying to compensate for things that we would normally have easy access to. Even the libraries are shut down because they got so much water damage, so it's not like you can go to the library and use their Wi-Fi. And none of the restaurants or cafes out here are either open or have their Wi-Fi because Cox hasn't fixed anybody's Wi-Fi. So a piece like this would normally take 2 to 3 days, maybe, depending on the weather. It took about a week because of extended dry times due to humidity control issues and just not necessarily being at home long enough to sink a significant chunk of time into painting. So once I got the stump about where I wanted it to be, I started focusing on painting Kara herself, since she's a known entity. She's an established character. If you're new here, wow, what a time to be new. Hi, welcome. I apologize that you're hearing a lot about her. Well, no, I'm not sorry that you're hearing a lot about Hurricane Ida, but I want to assure you I'm not generally a complainy kind of person here on the channel. I try to be much more chill. It's just been rough, as you can imagine. So Kara is the main character from my webcomic, 7-Inch Kara. You can read it at 7inchkara.com, or if you enjoy dead trees, like I do, i.e. books, you can buy Volume 1 and Volume 2 through my online shop. I know, what a great time for a sales pitch. I'm currently on hiatus with Kara right now because this year has just been a lot to juggle. And there hasn't really been a whole lot of time where I had a set routine. And as someone with ADHD, I really need set routines to like be able to sit and focus and work. And I was really hoping that after we moved into the house that we just bought, our forever home, that I could focus on Kara again, because we just spent the last 9 months house hunting. And by that I mean 3 times a week going out and looking at houses, actively making offers on houses, researching things. It's been a year, y'all. How are y'all doing? Are y'all good? I hope all of y'all are safe. I hope nobody's gotten sick. I hope nobody has COVID, because this has been a year for everyone. I recognize that. So I'm not really going to walk you guys through Kara. I honestly didn't walk you guys through a whole lot. That wasn't the intention of this video. I have a lot of watercolor tutorials here on the channel that I will happily and lovingly link for you guys. So check the cards and check the description if you're looking for more how-to watercolor. It's my goal to help you make art a habit. It's my goal to make art more accessible, and generally when I have a steady internet connection, I love doing weekly live streams where we talk about different watercolor or marker or art topics. I also teach art more informally. I do a lot of gig teaching with libraries. In fact, Ida hitting my libraries has put me out of a job right now. So hard times were had by all. But with Kara, my main goal was to make it look like she'd gotten caught in this rainstorm. So she has this white shirt on, and I wanted to make it look translucent without being overly revealing. So I painted a couple layers of her skin through the fabric first. So I started out by kind of establishing the shirt's existence with really light washes of ultramarine blue, because when you're painting white objects, they're not really white to the viewer unless you want to create this really stark, kind of unnerving contrast, which you might want to do. There's artistic merit in that, but you want to be choosy about when you do it. So whites usually reflect their local color, the colors in the environment around them. They can have like a bluish tint, a grayish tint, a yellowish tint, a pinkish tint, you know. that kind of thing, just very, very light. And your brain will still read that as white, but will read it as white with cast shadows on it, which is what I was going for. So I painted those really light layers of white first, and then I painted her skin tone on top of that. And then as I was shading the white shirt and adding a more saturated ultramarine blue, I painted that on top of the dry skin tone. So once the watercolor dried fully, I can start removing the masking fluid, and I'm using a masking fluid pickup here. It's basically just a bunch of masking fluid boogers all stuck together. It can also be referred to as like a rubber cement pickup. And I really like these because I've tried using my finger to remove masking fluid, and I've tried using the back of a brush to do that, and it doesn't work for me. I've seen other artists do it, but it does not work for me. But a masking fluid pickup does work for me, and you can find them all kinds of places, including Dollar Tree in the arts and crafts section. You can also sometimes find them in automotive sections because it can be used to remove like little bitty details of tape that were used to mask things. And you can often find them in office supply stores or at places like Michael's. So if you like masking fluid but you have trouble using masking fluid, a masking fluid pickup might be a big help for you. So once I remove the masking fluid, what I like to do when I'm painting dewdrops or raindrops, and I've talked about this a lot, is I like to get some of that color moving back into the areas that I reserved, like they're reflecting that color or like they're translucent. So I sprayed it down with water to get some color movement, and when I wasn't able to get quite as much color as I might have wanted moving, I went ahead and I used a wet brush just with clean water to kind of agitate some of the pigments to get them moving. And I'm just kind of going back in and adding additional layers to the leaves. I'm also adding some more splatter effects because I want kind of like the sun is catching some of the still airborne water molecules. My brain keeps wanting to say water particles, and it keeps mashing molecules and particles together. ADHD is fun. And I'm also, right now, I'm kind of painting through the dewdrops. So I'm painting a little bit of the local color kind of towards the bottom where they would have more shade, where they wouldn't be reflecting the sun, so you could actually see through them. And after that has a chance to dry, I'm going to go over that and add a little bit of ultramarine blue to just kind of solidify the fact that these are objects that have form and shape and mass. I am pretty sure you guys can hear a soft buzzing sound, and it might actually be louder because my mic picks up weird things. That is the fan in my room, and it being Louisiana, if I didn't have a fan going, I would be dying of the heat. So I apologize for that. I'm doing the best that I can. It's just been tough times all around for everybody. So I'm flicking in some really saturated ultramarine blue, and something I noticed is that in full, and this is Sennelier ultramarine blue. So it's a high quality professional grade pigment that I use all the time. Something I noticed with very saturated ultramarine blue is that it is fully opaque and it can stand up to whatever you put it on. So if you're looking for transparency, a traditional ultramarine blue, PB 29, especially a high quality watercolor, is not going to give you that translucency. You're going to need to look to a different color for that, or maybe work a little less saturated. But I wanted that saturation because it kind of gives the implication of water spray or raindrops or water kind of bouncing off the tree stump, bouncing off the environment. So once everything had a chance to dry, I pull out my trusty watercolor pencils. I've talked about these a lot, but I'll talk about them again. I usually save them for just the details or refining colors or adding highlights or adding shadows or adjusting things. But I personally don't like using watercolor pencils for an entire watercolor illustration. For me, that's just kind of tedious. I don't really love color pencils for the same reason, so it's just not my jam. But I am using really high quality watercolor pencils. I have reviewed a lot of watercolor pencils on the channel because even though I don't like using them as a standalone for a piece, I'm familiar with them. I've used them before and I know what I'm looking for. So I am using Caran d'Ache's Museum Aquarelle watercolor pencils, which are really great, but they're also really expensive. I am also using Derwent Inktense pencils. These are India ink pencils. They're also great. They're indelible. Like after you've wet them and then they fully dry, they're indelible. They're not going anywhere. So you can actually layer on top of them without them smudging or turning to mud. And I'm also using Caran d'Ache's Super Color 2 watercolor pencils, since the Museum Aquarelle doesn't have as large a range as I would like. So sometimes you have to bulk it out. So even though I was using professional grade paints for this, I've been using my Daily Driver watercolor palette for this illustration, and I talk about that in its own video, and I also talk about all the art supplies I absolutely could not live without, so I evacuated with them, and I'll link that as well. Those are definitely my must-haves. It's a great way to kind of pare things down, although kind of sad. But anyway, even though I'm painting with professional grade paints, sometimes you lose some of the contrast that you're looking for. Your line art gets kind of obscured and it can look kind of muddy. So once everything dried, I'm going back over it with the Sakura Pigma FB that I used to ink it in the first place. And I'm just kind of re-inking some of the lines that I want to, reestablish that contrast, reestablish that shadow, reestablish that weight. Because, so there's a lot to talk about when it comes to inking, and I've got some great playlists where I kind of walk you guys through it. But basically, if you want to give something clarity, if you want to give something contrast, if you want something to appear heavy and to have volume, you're going to want to ink that a little darker. You're going to want to ink that a little heavier because it gives it some implied weight. I also like to clean up the face using like re-inking it, because that just kind of adds some clarity back to the face and it kind of pulls the focus back into the face. And once I've finished inking it, I'm going in with a little bit of white gouache, which is a very opaque water-based paint. And I'm just kind of painting in highlights. I'm adding the reflection to our raindrops. I'm adding highlights to her hair. I'm adding highlights to her eyes. That adds a little bit of liveliness when you have a really cartoony anime-inspired style like my art style. And I'm also using it to add a little bit of rim lighting to some of the leaves, because that's going to help give some delineation. And of course, it would not be a Becca Hilburn watercolor tutorial if I didn't do some splatter effects, because I guess I can't help myself. after removing the largely ineffective washi tape, I have a finished watercolor illustration. I have a Twitter tutorial that I'll link in the description for you guys where I walk you through different aspects of this. As always, if you guys have specific questions, if you'd like to see things demonstrated in a different way, if you would benefit from a different format, please do let me know. I'm trying to be as accessible as possible and kind of accommodate as many different needs as possible. As somebody with ADHD, I don't really learn very well from video tutorials myself. I like watching them, but that's more for entertainment and relaxation than to actually learn. But I really love written tutorials. And since I've kind of killed off my, Blogspot kind of killed off my old blog by letting it rot, I've been trying to find different ways to share written tutorials with you guys that is accessible and helpful. So let me know what your questions are. Let me know what you guys would like to see more of, and please check out the cards in the description for more tutorials. So here is our apple tree. It's got even more growth on it. This thing is not going to give up, and neither should I. So hopefully Ida Recovery will pick up the pace and I'll be in my new home soon, living, painting walls, and finding a routine. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope I didn't bum you out too much, and hopefully you learned a few things about what it's like living in the aftermath of a hurricane. Tutorials, art chats, and walkthroughs like this one would not be possible without the help, support, and encouragement of my amazing patrons on Patreon. I have a bunch of student grade watercolor reviews coming up for you guys that are only possible because of their support. So here they are. A huge thanks to them. If you'd like to join their hallowed, esteemed ranks, you can join me at patreon.com/natosoup. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.